Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session, Creating an Effective Online Presence with Ms. Roshini. My name is Iza, and I'm from SHRDC, and together with my colleague Lynn, we'll be your moderators for today. Before we begin, we're just going to go through a quick housekeeping check. The microphone for all the participants in this session will be muted, but just to be sure, could you please make sure that it's muted on your end? And unfortunately, due to our constraint on time, the raise hand reaction will not be attended. But if you have any general questions regarding today's session, please type them in the chat box. And if you have any questions regarding the topic of today's session, you can type your questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen, which we will address at the end of the session. For optimal viewing, we recommend selecting the speaker's view up on your ribbon on top. And yeah, that's about it. Before we begin, I'd just like to give a quick introduction of our speaker today. Roshini has been in corporate training for over 19 years and trained in over 10 countries. Often complimented for her energy, enthusiasm, and engaging style, she has been effectively skilling people in the areas of business presentations, customer service, emotional intelligence, new manager development, and leading effective change. Roshini has also been actively involved in the design process of workshops in the areas of optimism and resilience, customer service, and communication. Roshini is a licensed trainer of John Cotter International's Change Essentials, Our Iceberg is Melting, and Sean anchors Happiness Advantage, Orange Frog Leading Positive Results. In addition to being a master practitioner in neurolinguistic programming, a certified trainer in EQ, an accredited trainer in Think on Your Feet. This session will take approximately 45 minutes to an hour. Without further ado, I'd now like to hand it over to Ms. Roshini.
Okay, I think it helps if I unmute myself. Thank you so much, Eza, for that lovely introduction. And thank you so much to all of you for being here today as I share with you on how to create an effective online presence. I think to say that our lives have changed dramatically, right? In the last few weeks, the last few months, I think is an understatement. And in spite of all these dramatic changes, you know, in the way we work, the way we communicate, the way even how we have fun, some things still remain the same. So the fact is, we are all still having to go for meetings. We are all still having to meet our customers. And we are all still having to do presentations. But what's interesting is that the way we're doing presentations today is very different. So all of us right now, the environment is Zoom. But Zoom is not the only platform that I'm subscribed to. And I'm sure you too are subscribing to other platforms like WebEx and GoToMeetings and MS Teams. And yet this environment, which might be exciting to some of you, it can be a little bit confusing, a little bit chaotic. So, you know, presentations that are supposed to be beneficial sometimes may not quite have the same outcomes we want. But that's not the only thing that's changed, right? Apart from the environment, our audience has changed. For example, I can't see you, literally. Or if I can see you, you're either just a name or a little black tile. So, you know, when it comes to the audience, we're not able to see your faces. We're not able to see your expressions. So that also has changed somewhat. And the thing about presenting is when we can't see our audience, for a lot of us presenters, we can't help wonder, what else is going on? Is the audience doing other things like maybe online shopping, gaming, maybe even texting to their buddies? Well, some people have actually done the research, and here is the data. So this appeared in Harvard Business Review some time ago, and conference calls are a little bit like the presentations we are having to do online. And look at the numbers in terms of what people are doing as people are presenting, right? So, you know, it from other work to visiting the restroom to even exercising. So this can be quite alarming for us presenters, because we have been used to doing one-to-one boardroom, maybe even town hall presenting, and suddenly everything that we used to do, or at least a lot of the things that we used to do, doesn't quite work. So is this challenge or is this an opportunity? So my suggestion is that we should look at it as a challenge, yes, that we can all rise to, but it's also an opportunity because now we can have a further reach for those of us who need to when it comes to online presenting. We can videotape our presentations, which means that the videotape presentation can be used for marketing and maybe even reaching other markets that were not accessible to us. So it really pays to focus on how to manage this new normal. And when we're talking about online presence, I can't help, say that it's all about how do we make sure that we're engaging the audience so that they are with us, listening to us, and actually getting the message that we want to communicate. Now, this session, I am going to make it as interactive as possible. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask some questions now and then, and I would love it if you could put your responses in the chat. So I'm going to start already with my first question. So I mentioned that, yes, lots of things have changed, but some things are still the same. The same is true when it comes to presenting. So for example, when we were presenting in person, and as we are presenting now virtually, what would you say are the things that still remain the same? It makes no difference whether you're presenting live and in person or whether you're presenting online, virtually. What would you say are some of the similarities? Please go ahead and put it in chat so that I can see what are some of the responses. So thank you, Christine. Absolutely. Content is still pretty much the same. You still have to prepare your content. You still have to think about what you want to say. What else would you say is still similar in terms of presenting, whether you're presenting in person or online? Any other contributions? People, yes, even though we can't see them, the people are still there. The fact that you have a particular audience that you need to present to, so you need to still do your research on your audience. So thank you so much, Minakshi. Thank you so much, Chinwan and Brian, for that too. And Chris, you still have to put on the nice top or the nice shirt. So absolutely, grooming is still important. Although I would say that we, have moved on to less formal, grooming, right? When it comes to what you wear. Having said that, so what would you say are the differences? So if those are the similarities, thank you, Boon Hoy. You're right. So objectives are still the same. You still have to do your homework. You still have to prepare your content. You still have to make sure you're understanding the audience. So if those are the similarities, then what would you say are the differences? What would you say are the differences in presenting? Yeah, so Minakshi, you hit the nail on the head there. Absolutely. We can't see people's body language. So how do we know if they are understanding us? How do we know if they are getting us, right? How do we know whether they are interested in what we are saying? So these are some of the challenges that we have. And Chaiman has also mentioned that the way to engage the audience is so different now as well, because so what do you do? How do you engage them? How do you make sure that you're encouraging the questions and the participation? So let me just share with you that I'm so grateful to SHRDC for inviting me to do this talk, because SHRDC are our partners in Malaysia. I am actually based in Singapore, and with our workshop that we run with SHRDC, we have certain outcomes that we focus on. So when it comes to virtual presenting, we still focus on the content. We talk about energy and engagement. We also talk about visuals for online presentation, which has to be slightly different from how you create it for live in-person sessions or presentations, and the calmness and confidence when you're dealing with tech. Now, obviously, when we are talking about online presence, a little bit of each component needs to be in there, right? But mainly, I would say it has a lot to do with energy and engagement as well as visual aids. So the time that we have today, I would like to be able to share more on these two areas. Okay, let me just go ahead and ask you another question. When we are talking and speaking about presenting online, obviously we want to engage, and part of engagement is the energy we bring to the session. So I'm sure you've heard that saying, right? Whenever you are, the camera actually adds pounds to the person. When you take a photograph, when you are on screen for actors and actresses. So whatever you see, apparently they look 10 pounds heavier, which means they're slimmer in real life. So in your opinion, how much of energy is decreased when you are online? So Joanne, you have mentioned 90%. Oh my gosh, I hope not. Chris, it's 50%. Could I have one more number, another guess? How much does our energy decrease? 20 to 30%. Wow. I don't know whether you attended the same talk I did, but there is a really lovely lady called Simone Heng, whom you can connect with and follow on Facebook, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. And I was attending her session, and I'm sure she's not the only person who says this, but she says that the camera actually decreases your energy by 20 to 30%, which means your job as an online presenter is to ramp up that energy. But here's the thing, how do you do that? So there are a few ways that we can increase our energy. And the first thing would be your voice. Now, sometimes when I talk about energy, some people think, okay, so I need to speak louder. Well, loud doesn't always mean energy. But first, let me share with you that your voice is a very powerful communication tool. So how you think and how you feel is reflected in your voice. This is true whether you're online or whether you're live and in person. So for example, if you think your presentation content is boring, guess what? People will hear it in your voice. If you feel nervous, anxious, people will hear it in your voice. So your voice is a powerful tool. So you need to manage what you're thinking, how you're feeling, so that it's reflected in your voice. But here are other tips that I think you might find really useful as well. So I attended, as part of being a member of the Asia Professional Speakers in Singapore. I happened to be on the Exco as well. I get a chance to see and listen to some really wonderful speakers. And recently, we had an actress who's turned speaker, share with us some of her thoughts and some of her lessons when it comes to presenting. And she talked about how our voice needs to go in waves. And I love the way she talked about it because, obviously voice, sound waves, that makes sense. But what exactly do we mean in waves? Now, some of you probably have heard this saying that you need to have vocal variety. So where does our vocal variety come from? Well, it comes from three parts. You have pitch, volume, and tempo. Now, when it comes to pitch, again, there are three levels of pitch. You've got low pitch voices, you've got medium pitch voices, and then you've got very high pitch voices. And volume, again, there are three levels. You have the people who like to speak very fast, the people who speak slowly, and then the moderate volume, right? So when it comes to volume, it's about loudness. Tempo is about fast and slow, and volume is about how loud or how soft you go. Now, the important thing about pitch, volume, and tempo is this. What is your pitch? What is your volume? What is your tempo? Now, the reason I ask is because if you are only having the same pitch, the same volume, the same tempo all throughout your presentation, there are no waves. So you've got to change it up. You've got to have that vocal variety. Now, one easy way to add variety to your voice is to do something called emphasis. Now, emphasis is all about emphasizing your key words and phrases. So let me share with you why we talk about emphasis. When you are sending emails and when you're writing reports and you're sending it in, what do you do to words that you want your audience to pick up on? Chances are you underline, you bold it, you color it, you put it in italics. Why? Because you know that anything that's slightly different from the norm will be picked up. It's the same is true when it comes to listening. So if you are able to bold your words, your keywords with your voice, that's a way of adding vocal variety. So for example, you may have noticed that sometimes when I want to try and emphasize something, I go a little bit slower. Or sometimes you might want to go faster. Maybe you want to say it slightly higher pitch or louder, softer, so you change it around. These are the different ways you could emphasize your keywords and key phrases. Okay, so that's how you would add waves to your voice. I also want to highlight the importance of silence. A touch of pausing just before or just after a key important message is also a great way of emphasizing. So that's how you can add some wonderful variety to your voice. Now, apart from voice, how else can you add that energy? Let it be conversational. This is the best tip I've had. So if you imagine that you are sharing something to someone that you know well, automatically you will go conversational. So for example, if I were to share with you this statement like this. Hi, Betty. Yesterday I went into the store and I tried on this red top and I really like the look of it. But I think I may need a second opinion. Would you mind coming in with me to give me a second opinion? Very monotone, right? We never speak like that. And yet, for some reason, when we are in front of a camera, we suddenly go very serious or we go very deep and we bring out this broadcaster in us. So we don't want to do that. We want to have that color in our voice. Betty, guess what? I saw a red blouse yesterday and I tried it on. It fit really nicely, but I need a second opinion. Would you mind coming in with me and giving me that second opinion? So much of color in the voice, right? So keep it conversational. Now, eye contact. When you have people in front of you, it's so easy to have eye contact. But how do you do it with online? The camera. You need to make eye contact with the camera. Simone Hain goes as far as to say, you need to flirt with the camera. Well, you don't really have to do that. But here's what $1,000 speakers do. They have cardboard boxes. They have books. They put their laptops, their computers on the books so that their eye line and camera are in the same line. Why? Because it gives the impression that you are making eye contact with the person. So looking right at the camera is really critical. What else do we need to think about for online presence? So here's a question for you. Do we sit or do we stand? Can you share with me what is your preference? Do we sit or do we stand when we are presenting? Now I can share with you. So Joanne has put their stand. During conference calls and where you don't have videos, I always recommend people to stand because your voice energy is much better. Why? Because your diaphragm is not being squeezed when you sit down. Having said that, a lot of us are having to sit down because we are working in our homes or we don't have a studio set up. Now, you can stand and do presentations, but you will need to make sure that you have markers on your floor so that you know exactly where to move from left to right. Because again, you've only got that square screen and people need to be able to see you. And you've got to, make sure your lighting is right as well. So, take note that if you're standing, there are certain challenges for it. When you're sitting, my suggestion is to make sure you're sitting slightly forward towards the edge of the seat so that your back is straight and you're not squeezing the diaphragm. So it's very related to posture. So don't present in comfy chairs where you're sinking into it, because that will really affect the energy in your voice. Okay, so these are some things to keep in mind with whether to sit, stand, and your posture. Now, talking about hands, gestures, right? So do you use your hands? When do you use gestures? Well, remember I talked about emphasizing your keywords and phrases? Use your hands to emphasize those keywords and phrases. But one of the things we say about hands is this: too many gestures are as bad as too few. By the way, this is the same no matter whether you are presenting live in person or online. So, how do you manage it? Use it only when you are going to add emphasis to a keyword. The other thing I need to share with you is make sure your hands are in frame. Now, the actress that I was telling you about, who talked about speaking in waves, she talked about how when she moved from a stage acting to TV acting, after she did one of her first scenes, her director, after calling cut, came to her and said, "You know what? I really loved the way you were using your hands, that you were showing so much of emotion with your hands. Pity the camera didn't catch it." So you want to always make sure you know about placement of hands. Now, be very careful. Hands, gestures can sometimes cover your face. So make sure if you're using your hand gestures, you know exactly how your audience is, viewing it. Okay? This is where videotaping actually helps. So what more do I have for you? Nonverbal communication really adds drama and energy, and it definitely makes the words that you have already developed in your content really come alive. Now, the other thing that can really help you with your presentation is having great visual aids. But visual aids, I'm going to do a little poll. So I'm going to show a poll that is going to ask you this question. Okay, and the question is, what is the most annoying thing about presentation slides? Now, I've taken this from Gihan Pereira's webinar called Stunning Slides for Online Presentations, and you get to choose one. For, in your opinion, what would you say is the most annoying thing about presentation slides? So can we go ahead and launch the poll? Asa, once we have 80% of people voting, can I get you to stop the poll and share the results?
Yep, we're at 68% now.
We're at 68%, thank you. We'll just give it a few more seconds and then we'll close the poll.
72%, any more takers?
Any more people who want to vote?
76%, 80%, all right.
Lovely. Okay, let's go ahead and close it. And could you share the results with me? Okay, all right, so interesting. Most of you have voted for presenters reading from slides. A few, the next one is text is too small, absolutely. And then, we've got a few more for the complex and the full sentences. So let's go ahead and see what were the results of this 2017 survey. Now, over here, basically, what people agree on is that when presenters are reading from the slides, this is where the most annoying thing, which means that, and this is, by the way, true, whether it is virtual or whether it is live in-person presentations. So we need to stop reading from the slides. But here are other things that we need to take note of. When we were live and in person, the role of the visual aids was there to enhance. That's why we called it an aid. It was supposed to be our assistant to support our message, our instructions, or whatever it is that we were trying to communicate. When we are online, remember what I was sharing with you right at the beginning about the current situation with audiences? We're having to compete with a lot. You're competing with family, because some people will be at home when they're listening to your presentation. We have to compete with open windows, with things going on outside, clutter on the desk, other work that's going on. And you already saw those results about what people tend to do when presentations are going on. So because of that, when it comes to presentation slides, we need to look at it differently. We need to start getting obsessed with our slides. And when I talk about slides for online presentations, a lot of what I'm getting is from Gihan Pereira, whom you would have seen me quote earlier. And he talks about how, you know, in the past, maybe we were the visual, but today with online presentations, it's the slides that are the visuals. Now, you might be wondering where I'm getting some of the lovely pictures I'm getting. I'm getting it from a free site where you can get free photos. Pixabay and Unsplash are what is used by a lot of people, even for LinkedIn and when we're doing our slides. I do always give them, you know, you must always give them credit either at the end of the slides or with every picture you are using. Just one tip about finding great pictures: always make sure you use keywords that are not just directly related to your slide title, but think about the message you're trying to convey and use those as your keywords. And then you find some really fabulous pictures. So I hope this is going to be a useful site for you. Now, I did mention that I was only going to share about, you know, energy and engagement, as well as our visual aids, which I have done. But I wanted to share a couple of bonus tips around this topic, because when we talk about online presence, we also talk about our setup, right? So what would you say is more important? Should we keep it real with our setup, especially in terms of in the context of our backgrounds, or should we use virtual backgrounds? So what would you say, what would be your responses? So keep it real. I've got one person saying keep it real. Thank you, Meenakshi. So Teresa also has mentioned keep it real. Chris, keep it real, but simulate what it looks like to the audience. Okay, so keep it real and have a nice place. So can you see the images that are on the screen? Basically, that's where I am. I am in my room. And what I'm doing is I pulled out, you know, an old screen, which I haven't used for the last like 14 years. And I just draped a table runner at the back of it. So my backdrop is basically that. Now, other things to keep in mind about your backdrop is to make sure that you keep it real. Oh, so here's another statistic, which I hope that you will find, you know, reassures and reinforces what you have said, which is if you use an actual room, apparently it makes you more authentic. It conveys the impression you're an expert, that you're innovative, and you're trustworthy, which is so important when we are communicating, right? I do not mind the virtual backgrounds if you are using it for entertainment value. And I've seen speakers do that very well. And I really think that you can also use it well for branding. But if you are going to use a virtual background, please make sure either you have a really powerful computer or you have a green screen. Because if you don't have green screens, it really doesn't work. I'm not in favor of the disappearing hands and the disappearing heads, you know, and things like that. Now, if you're using a green screen though, and you're using a virtual background, another tip about grooming: do not wear green, because then, you know, it really goes crazy. Yeah, getting a green screen is really important. I noticed someone mentioned something about lighting. Chunyuan, you're absolutely right. So lighting, again, I keep it real. You can buy equipment for it, but what I do is I just bring in a lamp from my living room, a lamp from my bedside table, and that's my lighting. To throw a little bit of the yellow light, which is warmer, to kind of blend in with the white light, which is right above my head. Okay. Cameras and microphones, again, you know, only if you need it. Right now, I'm not using any extra camera or any extra microphone, but I'm lucky because the system I have obviously works. So folks, you know, I have shared with you um, a whole bunch of things when it comes to creating that online presence, why we need to do it, right? How we can do it with our non-verbal communication, like our voice, our gestures, our eye contact, our posture. I've also thrown in some, you know, key information about visual aids, some bonus tips as well about setup. So I would love to hear from you, just from that 30-minute session that I've done for you. What would be that one thing you learned that you're taking away, or one thing that you would like to change before I go into hearing your questions? Anything that you learned or that you'd like to change? So, yeah, so what are your key takeaways? Yes. Thank you so much, Yilin. What are your key takeaways from this session? I noticed that it is exactly 11:01. Thank you, Sharmila. It's about energy levels. Yeah, that's a really important one, I think, you know, to remember to up your energy levels. To keep it real, thank you, Christine. You come across more authentic, more trustworthy, keeping it real. Hand gestures, keep in frame. Thank you, Bunhoy. And to make sure you are speaking in waves. About your posture, nice handed postures. Thank you so much, Wanazli, Ping Xiong, and the HBR data. Okay, thank you. So I think let's go ahead and take some. So regardless of face-to-face or online, speak to your audience and not reading your content. You know, one of the things I do is, you know, you may have noticed that sometimes I'm looking this way. Now I can still make it, you know, even better if I just move my chat box to right under my camera, because then I can see your messages. And the reason I can do that now is because obviously I'm not presenting any of my slides. And now I can look at you and look at your messages as well. Thank you, Sukling. All right, questions. Any questions for me to field?
Great. Roshini, thank you for that session. I think I need to go back and practice how to speak in waves now. So I'll pass it over to Yilin for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Isa.
Thank you, Isa.
Hi,
thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation. And thank you, Roshini, of course, for the presentation. I'll get the ball rolling with the Q&A. I've got a question. In terms of the applications and technologies available on the common online platforms that we use, what are some of the ways that we can utilize to note changes in the attention span of the audience and or the level of interest?
Okay. So that's a really interesting question, and I think it's very relevant for us right now. Now, of course, it depends on the platform you're using. Like for today, for me, on a webinar, in a webinar context, I can't really see my audience faces, right? But in some Zoom meetings, and even with, I think with MS Teams now, there's more people, depending on how many people. Anytime you can have the opportunity to get your audience to turn on their cameras, and you know, so that you're able to see their faces, that's always the best. So in fact, whenever we do our sessions, so when we do 90-minute sessions or even our training, we always tell our participants that it's going to be a off mic, so mics off but videos on session. Now, of course, we can't, you know, mandate it and make it compulsory, but, you know, there are ways, you know, to encourage people to do it. And I find that obviously people find it easier when they're in breakout rooms to then turn on their camera. Now, the other thing is that to keep in mind with online presenting, every 5 to 7 minutes, you should have some sort of activity. You should have some sort of engagement. Now, here, because I had a very, very short amount of time, I limited myself to just the chat function as well as the poll, which is great. You know, even if you're doing just that is really important. But there are, so those would be some of the ways to, or maybe to share some part of your presentation, and then to maybe get everyone into gallery view if it's possible. If you're in Zoom, then we are lucky enough to do that, have that, and get everyone to interact, on the platform itself. So those would be some of the ways I would use. But with a lot of the apps that we are using, unfortunately, not all of them have videos.
Yes.
So you have to make do with what you have.
Okay, thank you for that, Roshini. We have a question from Boon Hoi, and he's asking, what is the recommended duration for a virtual session? He's
Okay.
attended a Zoom meetings or presentation where there are 45 attendees, and it lasted 3.5 hours, and he has cited Zoom fatigue.
Oh gosh, I feel for you. Okay, so if it is a presentation, if it is a talk, gosh, the longest we would recommend is 90 minutes, and even in that 90 minutes you would have a break after 45 minutes. So every 45 minutes there should be a 5-minute break. That's what we suggest. Now, of course, in a training context, right? Because if you are training, you need a lot more time. I do understand where the 3.5 hour comes from, but we would say that even in the 3.5 hours, it should be 45-minute, 5-minute break, 45-minute, 10-minute break. So that means you have, in that 90 minutes, 15-minute break. So that's our recommendation. The other thing that I've noticed other people doing is to do a 90-minute session, right? So it's a 1.5 hour session, go for lunch, and then come back for another hour and a half. I mean, so there are many ways to break things up, but 3.5 hours at one shot, yikes, that's really not recommended at all. And I think it kind of like has diminishing returns, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, because we all have limited attention span,
Absolutely.
and it is harder to do so in front of a device, definitely.
Yes.
All right. In relation to that, we've got another question. Chin Yuan, for online presentation or teaching, what is your suggestion on what can be used to substitute training room group activities? That's a good question.
Okay. So again, it depends on the platform you're using, right? Because with Zoom, with WebEx, with Blue Jeans, with GoTo Training, all of them have breakout rooms. The only difference is that with Zoom and Blue Jeans, you have videos also in the breakout rooms. You don't have videos for WebEx and GoToMeetings or Adobe Connect. So, breakout rooms are very, very good ways of kind of redoing some of the activities that you might do, but they're really great for discussions. They're really great for structured discussions, I would say. The other thing I would suggest is using third-party apps. So third-party apps could be things like Jamboard, like using Miro or Mural, where you can create either templates where people can go to have discussions. You can embed videos in it, so people can watch a video and then have a discussion in a virtual setup. And the wonderful thing about things like Jamboard, Mural, Miro, these are all things that is like it's almost like a common space that all the participants can go to and interact on. And because it's stuff that you can also PDF, it's a great takeaway. So everything that's learned, in the past we could take our flip charts, right? And we can present with our flip charts. But when you use these third-party apps, I don't really like the whiteboards that are on most of these, like Zoom. I don't like the Zoom whiteboard, for example. So using things like this is a great way of enhancing and adding to your training. And there's a website called Session Lab, SESSION Lab. Do check it out, check it out, because they have a lot of activities that are virtual for the virtual platform. So if you're a trainer and you're a teacher, you can use some of these things. But I wouldn't use it in short sessions. Reason is because it does take time to get used to some of these things, some of these apps. and you don't want to waste time with people getting familiar with it and people being frustrated over it. Great for training programs, but not so great for presentations, I would say. Long answer, sorry. Yes.
Yes, thank you for that, Roshini, because I think those tips are very helpful, because a lot of times we're thrown into this situation, unexpectedly, and it takes time for people to develop skills, and these apps would definitely come useful as well. I've used Padlet and I find it great.
Yes.
And you can see everybody's posting in there, and you can have a takeaway in the PDF format as well.
Yes, I only heard about Padlet when my son started, home-based learning. So you're absolutely right. Padlet is something that's used by a lot of our teachers here. Can I just tell you, can I just be real here? All my learning happened in the last few months. But what I've been doing is I have been a junkie when it comes to all the free sessions people are giving. So if you are interested, there's a guy called Joshua Davis. He's got lots of free stuff that you should check out.
Okay, so Ling has a question. She's asking about Google Classroom in relation to training and presentation and webinars.
Yeah, so I've heard a lot about Google Classroom. I have to admit, I don't use it myself. I do know a lot of trainers who use it as a way of creating almost like a learning management system. For trainers, I do recommend that you have some sort of learning management system to use. Why? Because often, you can have everything there. So the pre-work can be there, the submission of any assignments can be there, quizzes can be there. You can also put your videos there. And they tend to provide a much more stable platform to run a lot of things, and it's easier for your audience. So Google Classroom can also be used in that way, where you can create slides together or with your teams, whether it is asynchronous, so this term of doing it outside of the formal classroom. So those are great. So I do use Google Slides. I do use Google Docs and Google Slides in some of my workshops. Yeah.
All right, we have some questions in the Q&A box.
Okay.
First question from Chris, and he's asking, what are the best practices to stand and present online? So Chris is obviously partial to standing.
Yes, and I recently met a gentleman who is very new to virtual. He's a trainer, and he prefers to stand, and he loves having his flip chart next to him and doing things on the flip chart. And he has done it really nicely, but he has a setup. So he has a setup where he knows exactly where the camera is positioned. He also knows how far. Now, if you have someone to follow you, or you have one of those wonderful, cameras that follows you, automatically, so you actually can buy those. I don't know, they're quite expensive, I think. So you can get that, but if you don't have that, then you need to know where to place your camera and what is the camera capturing. And so in that space, what's the furthest right and furthest left you can move? So you need to put markers on the floor to make sure that you don't go beyond, the left and right and the front and back. So those are some of the things I would recommend. Lighting is really important. I know that those ring lights are really popular. The only reason why I'm very cautious about recommending them, I like them because they've got 3 different lightings. It's just that sometimes if you don't have the right pair of glasses, it reflects on your glass. So if you have a painting behind you which has got glass on it, it reflects on there, and people can see it. It's not so nice. So to get those photographers soft box lighting is better, and you can put it on the floor. You can put it, and create that lovely glow. So that would be some of the suggestions I would make. But I totally get you, and I know a lot of presenters and trainers that actually do it, standing up. So go for it.
Yes, and I think practice will make it perfect eventually.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, we've got another question from one ASEAN, and she's asking, what are the technical challenges with Zoom and the other applications if needed? And she gave examples of Slido and Menti.
Okay. So Menti is like a third-party app. I don't know too much about Slido, but I love the using Mentimeter for, when we're doing polls and to create those lovely clouds, word clouds, and you can show in real time people's responses. I love that because with Mentimeter, you can put the link, into the chat. You can create a QR code. People, if they are on, they are looking at their computer, they can go on the phone straight away to www.menti.com and just put in the code. So I love using things like that. I think that those are great, when you're doing training or even presenting. I think they're fantastic. For me, in terms of technical issues, the platform I have found the least issues would be Zoom. So I always recommend Zoom to just about everyone and anyone. My challenges have been mainly with MS Teams because it's really difficult to create breakout rooms. The other, I wouldn't say a challenge, WebEx and Adobe Connect, which are the other two I'm quite familiar with. The only challenge with them is there's a lot of things to remember with the technicality. So for example, in WebEx, before you send people to their breakout rooms, you must always make sure they unmute first. And it's something that, we don't think about. So they have to unmute first before you send them. And when they are going, they must switch the audio. So it's a little bit clunky, in my opinion. So those are some of the technical issues, but you know what? When I started off with Zoom, I had technical issues, but it was more because I wasn't used to it, right? So exactly what you said, Yilin, earlier, practice makes perfect. So the more familiar you get, things start flowing a lot better.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, we have a bit more time left. Please do post your questions or comments in the Q&A box or the chat box. And while we wait for more questions, Roshini, perhaps you can share with us tips on how do we work with our colleagues to prepare effective webinars and meeting sessions. For example, how many do we need to have apart from the presenter in terms of making sure that we've covered most of the issues and challenges and in case any technical issues crop up.
Okay, so, regardless of whether you're doing a short meeting or whether you're doing a 1.5 hour, maybe like a webinar type of thing, I think one of the things that's really helped my business partner and myself, Meenakshi, who's also somewhere, in the call, we always have dry runs. We always have dry runs. And, we have found the dry runs to be invaluable and prepared us for the worst case scenarios. The other is to always have backup. What do I mean by that? One disastrous day of training for both Meenakshi and myself is when we had to use WebEx to do a training. And for the whole 3.5 hours, well, of course, not counting the break, so it's less than 3.5 hours, I had to hold my phone and use my phone to see the slides and connect to the audience while having something else because I couldn't connect to the WebEx for some reason. It wouldn't allow me to. So having backups and knowing that as long as you have another iPad or a device, then you are all, so always have plan B and plan C, so Meenakshi is putting in her 2 cents there, absolutely, right? The other thing I would say also is to, for the audience sake, let's say you are planning to use one of these third-party apps, like say Jamboard or Menti or even Mural or Miro. I would say, give them an opportunity to go and try it out. Before the meeting, if you need them to use it, that would be something I would use. I would do. The other is for a meeting. If it's a meeting, I think managing expectations is very important, and there are 2 ways you can do this. Have some sort of a letter. Make sure there's an agenda, and I think this is also good practice for in-person meeting. But the video that you create can also be quite a nice one to manage expectations. So you could create a video to maybe introduce yourself, introduce this, let them know, manage the expectations that it's going to be a video on and microphones off session. So to be prepared for that. Prepare them for the fact that it's technology, so things can sometimes go wrong. So seek their understanding and patience, that sometimes things will happen, but if you get bumped out, all you need to do is just jump back in as soon as possible. So those are some of the things I would recommend.
Thank you very much, Roshini. We've got one last question, I think, before we end the session, from Sokling. What is your favorite third-party app for virtual training purposes? Your favorite?
My favorite third-party app. Oh my gosh. I never thought I would say this, Sukling, but first of all, I have to say that although it's only been 3 months, I am absolutely loving training online now. I used to have a lot of biases against it, a lot of reservations about it, but I have really swung the other way. And an app that I really didn't like in the past, which I'm beginning to slowly see the benefits, is basically Miro. I like Miro and Jamboard. I like both of them. I haven't used Padlet yet, Yilin. I think I might go and try that out. But basically, these are the ones I like, Miro and Jamboard. Yeah.
All right. Sokling has got another question.
Sure.
What are some of the activities we can use without using any app? So it's more of an interaction based via the platform.
Okay, so let me just share with you. Let me see whether I can find it. Oh, I think maybe I've thrown it away. But I'll share with you what a fellow trainer did in her workshop. And basically, she got us, I really can't find it now. She got us to draw out little pieces of paper. And they were really small. It was like about this size. And she got us to draw out hearts. She said, create a red heart and a red question mark. And so we didn't know why we had to do it. But basically, as people were sharing whatever they were sharing, if we liked what we were hearing, we basically flashed our hearts. So a little bit like, pressing the like button and the love button in Facebook and, even now on LinkedIn. So that's what we would do. And then if we had a question that we needed to ask, we would just put up a question mark. And these are all very simple ways to do it. So because of that, for one of my talks, I actually got a piece of A4 paper. So again, I told the participants to come in with A4 paper and colorful markers. So just like magic pens like this. And I got them to fold their A4 paper into 4 until it was this size, right? And so I took pictures of it and I told them to call each quadrant a number. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then all throughout the training, I got them to fill out and do different things in the quadrant with the colorful magic pens that they had. And so by the end of the session, they had an A4 paper full of things that we covered in the session. So these are ways that we can keep tech low and just still have that engagement going.
That sort of replaces the lack of non-verbal cues, the body language.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, there's a takeaway, a physical takeaway for the audience and the participants.
Absolutely. I think if I can just add one more thing is that one thing that's critical in online training or presenting is that your instructions have to be crystal clear. And you know how people's attention spans are. So you need to say it out. You need to put it on the slide. Make sure that the people are taking a picture of the slide before they go into their breakout rooms. Make sure that the instructions are also in the chat. So you're hitting them at 3 different places with the instructions. And then, and don't leave it to chance. Always make sure you've assigned someone to be the leader, someone to be the presenter. That really helps to help people stay on track. So you want freedom, but you also want a little bit of structure. So again, Joshua Davis, go to his website. He's got a free online training it's all totally free. And he's also got information on what is called liberating structure. So go and look up that, that video, and there's a lot of information there for you.
Okay, we'll be sure to sort of follow that up with a thank you email and the links on Joshua Davis to all participants today. But last and not least, I sort of like to end by saying, if everything else doesn't work, we don't have to be too hard on ourselves, because all of these are relatively new to us, and we learn as we go, and we take away as much value as we can as users and providers of online content.
Yes, and can I just end by saying thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you, SHRDC, Yilin, Eza, for hosting me. I think when it comes to presenting online, sometimes we have to tap into our inner DJ for the voice variety. So think about your DJs. For the camera, it's maybe your inner broadcaster, right? So it's lights, camera, action. And I do hope that you will stay connected with me via LinkedIn.
Thank you, Roshini. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that it's a beneficial session for all of you, and I'll pass the session now back to Isa to finish off. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Yilin, and thank you again, Roshini. I think there's heaps of tips that we can all start practicing to become more effective virtual presenters. Before we go, we'd really like, sorry, if I could just share the screen.
I'll stop sharing.
Right. Yeah, no worries. All right, so I'm just going to quickly launch a poll, and we would really appreciate your feedback. We'll give you about a couple minutes. And if you do have any questions to ask us, feel free to contact the numbers and the email listed on your screens right now.